In the magical world of Mushoku Tensei, where battles between gods can erase entire worlds and clashing demigods can reshape continents, we follow a magical prodigy altering fate itself, surrounded by blessed children, rulers of kingdoms, and legendary heroes who once saved the world. We go on grand adventures and topple monarchies, we undermine princes and kings and gods, we even invent new forms of magic. And yet, an ordinary girl who isn't particularly strong or notably intelligent, who is a little bit clumsy, lacks self-confidence, whose name will never echo in the halls of fame, and exists in the shadow of two greater siblings, emerges as the most compelling character in the entire saga. Surrounded by exceptional people, Norn Greyrat is plainly average, and the greatest character in Mushoku Tensei. So now let me explain what makes her so great. A small girl was born to a small family in a small village, who after a few short years was teleported to a faraway land and raised alone by her father. She eventually meets her older brother, whom everyone treats as a prodigy. She then reunites with her younger half-sister, whom everyone treats as a genius. She then spends some time with her grandmother, who constantly berates her to be better than her illegitimate sister. Finally, she is given some room to breathe, having enrolled in the University of Magic while her sister remains at home, and yet once more she is bombarded with comparisons to her older brother. Norn is constantly compared to the people around her, and she silently hates it. She feels useless, she feels alone, but above all, she feels inferior. And it's not the motivational type of inferior where she vows to outdo her siblings, it's the type of inferior that makes her hate them, makes her lock herself in her room, wishing for the comparisons to stop. Happier to be forgotten than to be compared. This is how it feels to be Norn Greyrat in Volume 11. However, it is within this struggle that we get the first glimpse into the appeal of her character. Norn is resilient. Despite feeling neglected, useless, and inferior, despite being on the edge of locking herself away forever, she manages to get through it, and all it takes is for her to reflect on her feelings and work herself through them. In Volume 11, Chapter 5, we get a glimpse into her mind as she works through her emotions. A 10-year-old girl, hating, fearing, and feeling abandoned by her family. An absolute mess of emotions predicated on a life of feeling inferior. Shipped off by her father for being too much of a nuisance, berated by her sister for not putting in the effort, being told to be more like the brother she fears, who viciously beat up her father, and whom she could never even hope to compete with. Bitterness, sadness, self-pity, anger, and who knows what else, all bottling up inside while she's locked herself in her room. And yet, all it takes is for her to notice one nervous look from her brother, who would come to her side at the lowest point in her life, for Norn to reshuffle her whole perspective and bounce right back. On seeing her brother's nervous expression, she realizes that the brother she feared was in turn afraid himself, afraid of being rejected by her. And that's all it took to bring her back from despair. That one humanizing moment of a person she viewed as unreachably superior. She lets out all her emotions in a heartwarming cry, collects herself, and moves on. In the words of her older brother, she never told me what she was upset about or what she'd been feeling. She just cried for a long time. And then, when it was finally over, she looked up and mumbled, "I'll be okay now." This resilience is the first aspect of what makes her so interesting. In a story with its foundation in a man who was never able to overcome his trauma, a 10-year-old girl at the lowest point in her life, with not a single exceptional thing about her, uses her introspection and willingness to change her mind to demonstrate her exceptional resilience. In the words of Rudius himself, she'd managed to climb out of a hole I'd spent an entire lifetime trapped in. If I'd been half as strong as her, maybe my first life wouldn't have turned out so miserable. Settling into her new mindset and rebuilding her family bonds, Norn has shown remarkable growth since the shut-in incident, when unexpectedly, a plea for help arrives, a letter for Rudius penned by Geese, seeking aid in rescuing his mother Zenith. With his unborn child on the way, confronted with this dilemma, Rudius chooses to decline the request. However, a few days later, he runs into Norn, her belongings quietly packed, ready to undertake the journey alone, boldly prepared to step into Rudius's shoes. Witnessing the desperation of this young girl who had the will but not the means for saving her parents, Rudius is swayed and agrees to embark on the long and dangerous journey to Begarit. With 1 month having passed since Rudius's departure, on her way home from school one day, Norn is overtaken by a wave of selfish guilt. Rudius had abandoned Sylphie and their unborn child just to alleviate Norn's emotional turmoil. She pictures Sylphie weeping and weeping on hearing of Rudius's demise, holding a fatherless child in her arms. While emotionally spiraling over her perceived selfishness, Norn finds herself near a local church and begins to pray. She prays for the safety of her brother, and her father, and her mother, and of Lilia, but as soon as the words leave her lips, the familiar sting of selfishness resurfaces. Perhaps she was being too greedy, asking too much of the great Saint Millis. Despite this, she finds herself returning to the church time and time again, until one day her facade crumbles, as she realizes that though her words of prayer were seemingly spoken for the sake of others, they were doing nothing but soothing her own troubled heart. A selfish act disguised as a selfless one, masking away the fact that she is, and always has been, powerless. And here we arrive at the second appeal of Norn Greyrat's character, her unrelenting self-critique. Norn blames herself for things that are either not her fault or are just truly trivial in the grand scheme of things. Whether that be feeling selfish for soothing her emotional turmoil through prayer, or feeling like she'll fail the school entrance exam because she's not smart enough. Not because she spent the past year being forced to traverse an entire continent with no time to prepare for the exam. When she first moved into Rudius's house, she believed she would be in the wrong if she ever upset Rudius, no matter the reason. She even thought Rudyard would take Rudius's side, as perhaps she was being too rude or selfish. She also saw her desire to live in the school dorms as some sort of big selfish act, and when she's surprisingly allowed to move into the dorms, she thinks Rudy is only allowing it because he saw it as a golden opportunity to kick out his nuisance of a little sister. And she even sees herself as weak and pathetic for being sent away from her father, lacking the perspective to see that she's just a 10-year-old girl who should be the one protected, not have to be a protector herself. Norn is far too harsh on herself, and it is perhaps her most endearing quality. It makes the audience wish for her to recognize her own worth, recognize the strength and spirit that is clear to us, but not to her. It makes her incredibly relatable to those who grapple with questions of self-worth, and more generally, it fosters a great sense of empathy and investment in her character. Norn Greyrat cries a lot. She cries after the shut-in incident, she cries after the praying incident, and most famously she cries in the aftermath of the disastrous mission to rescue Zenith. The mission was essentially a complete failure. Rudius lost his hand, Paul lost his life, countless years of people's lives were wasted, and all that was retrieved was a husk of Zenith. Norn learns that her parents are gone forever, and she goes through a spectrum of emotions. Her first response is confusion, disbelief that her father could be dead. Then she has a brief moment of anger toward the brother she had placed all her faith in, the brother who ended up failing her. But before she can act on that anger, she realizes that Rudy truly tried his best, even at the cost of his own left hand. And so the emotion she ends up settling on is a mix of feeling worthless and just pure sadness. Despite this, she doesn't lock herself in her room or lose her mind to despair. She doesn't curse the world or curse her brother or even curse herself. She sobs and sobs and sobs, and then she stops. And despite being a swollen, red-eyed mess, she decides to do something with her emotional pain. She points to Paul's sword and asks if she could have it. What she developed from this traumatic situation was a burning passion to get stronger, to do her late father proud and help the best she can the next time a situation turns sour. And so we arrive at another aspect of what makes Norn so great, her emotional maturity. As we've established, Norn is a crybaby. In the aftermath of Paul's death, she cried all the tears that the rest of us hadn't. But when all that crying was finally done, she channeled the energy in a positive direction and proved her emotional maturity. Norn's kindness towards Aisha is another such example. She notices Aisha's restrained happiness upon Lilia's safe return, and reassures her that it's alright to express joy amidst Norn's sorrow. It's especially meaningful for Norn to express this, who for the longest time had hated the sister she had always been compared to. However, perhaps the most shining aspect of Norn's emotional profile is her sincerity. Norn always speaks her heart, even when it's not entirely welcome. For instance, her initial objection to Roxy joining the family. Her reasons were manifold: concern for Sylphie, a religious stand against polygamy, Roxy's youthful appearance, and her perceived intrusion into Rudy and Sylphie's relationship. And Norn passionately makes these thoughts clear to those involved. Although she later acknowledges her overstepping, her compulsion to speak her mind in this situation illustrates her ability to vocalize her heartfelt beliefs unapologetically. Norn is always true to herself, and where her heart lies is always plain to see. In the end, Norn Greyrat is a character who wears her heart on her sleeve. She always expresses exactly what she's feeling. At times, she can be an absolute crybaby, sure, but that's what makes her so appealing. Her tears show that she feels things deeply and unashamedly, and once she's done crying, she is always ready to take on the world once more. So Norn is resilient, Norn is self-critical, and she demonstrates great emotional maturity. However, when I think of Norn, the number one quality that jumps to mind is her work ethic. Norn is not exceptionally skilled in any way whatsoever. Compared to her peers, she is average academically, average at magic, doesn't know a thing about swordplay, and so on and so forth. However, she is very eager to better herself, and when she commits to something, she sticks to it. After the shut-in incident, she wants to do better at school, so she asks Rudy to tutor her in some of her subjects. This same drive is evident in her desire to help Rudy write his book about the history of the Superds, and while the mission in Bagarat is going on, she starts helping out with the student council. Even after the death of her father, she manages to balance her academics with learning swordsmanship under Rudy's tutelage. Her dedication is nothing short of relentless. She even willingly sacrifices a trip to the legendary hero Perugius's castle in order to maintain all of her commitments. Finally, Norn officially joins the student council, now balancing her schoolwork with sword practice, book writing, and student council duties. And all of this hard work pays off in one crowning achievement. The girl who was constantly compared to her siblings, feeling useless, alone, and inferior, becomes the student council president while only in her 5th year of school. This achievement is revealed in her speech as student council president during the university's entrance ceremony, a surprise to both Rudy and the audience. It's an amazing reveal that really highlights how much effort she'd been putting in the background while we had been paying attention to other things in the narrative. However, the culmination of Norn's character is actually in the scene after the entrance ceremony. Rudy is faced with arrogant new students, talking about how the student council president Norn isn't anything special, and how as scholarship students they'll make the school theirs in no time at all. Rudy lets Linnea put them in their place, teaching them a lesson in humility. But then comes Norn, standing tall, respected, and appreciated by all. She tells Rudius off for bullying the poor young students, and gives a really cute speech to them about how she will look after them if anything ends up troubling them during their time at the university. All the while, Rudy notices that the people watching this confrontation were looking toward Norn as a beacon of protection. It's evident in this scene that Norn is no longer the same girl we met in Volume 11. She is capable, confident, and above all, content. And she has finally found a place where she feels like she belongs. And it all stems from the hard work she put in to get to this point. The story of Norn is thus one of the transformative power of hard work and unwavering commitment, showing how an average individual can become an inspiring figure of resilience and determination, and find a place in this world where they are truly happy. And so we arrive at the heart of Norn Greyrat's appeal. In a world filled with heroes and prodigies, Norn is an ordinary person, struggling to find her place in life. We see her go on a profound journey from the pits of despair on the verge of locking herself away forever, to becoming a confident, content person who is a beacon of inspiration for all the people around her. This incredible journey, combined with resilience, excessive self-critique, emotional maturity, and incredible work ethic, makes Norn Greyrat my favorite character in Mushoku Tensei. A character that shows us that greatness can be found in the most average of hearts.